participating in this shared discussion with me today. The following presentation contains my opinions and also references my experiences in IT at UC Berkeley. And the format today is presentation followed by Q&A and discussion. So I ask that you save questions until the end of the presentation. So my name is Vanessa Kaskiris. I'm currently a manager in research, teaching, and learning at UC Berkeley. rtl.berkeley.edu is the URL. And I design, build, and launch successful commercial software and applications for many, many years, and now I do that at Berkeley. I'm a woman of color. I'm a mother of 7.5-year-old twins, and I'm passionate about my career in IT, in higher ed. I also supported a Nobel laureate to put myself through undergrad and grad school at Berkeley, and I'm an advocate for women in IT. This presentation is in service to the university that I love. It's also a fact-based assessment of UCB's activities post-negative publicity. And it is a review of input and feedback that I've received and that I've observed over the last year. So just so that we're all on the same page and that we're kind of coming at this from the lens that will help inform the rest of the presentation, I'm going to provide some definitions. There are a number of industry and academic references in this presentation. They're all listed at the end. I will make the deck available to those who'd like it. I reference repeatedly the Sexual Harassment of Women report that came out from the Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine in 2018. And I also reference the Women in the Workplace study from McKinsey and Lean In that was also published last year. So sexual harassment is any unwanted behavior directed at an individual because of their gender. My experiences were specifically with the form of sexual harassment categorized as gender harassment, so verbal and nonverbal behaviors that convey hostility, objectification, exclusion, or second-class status about members of one gender. And when does it become illegal? When it creates a hostile environment that is severe or pervasive enough to alter the conditions of employment, interfere with one's work performance, or impede one's ability to get an education. So this is a data point from the Lean In research. Women in technical roles experience sexual harassment at a rate of 45%, and less than 5% report it. So keep that in mind as I move through the presentation, please. So when does it thrive? Here are some of the characteristics of an environment that allows sexual harassment to really prosper. And I stand before you today as an example of an individual who stood up to sexual harassment at an institution that I care about. And I have great respect for anyone who is navigating the waters of sexual harassment in the workplace. In fact, I am contacted quite frequently by staff at all of the UCs who are experiencing sexual harassment and are evaluating their options. So this quote comes from a report that a third-party company named Civility Partners initiated in IT over the course of the last year. I'll talk a little more about Civility Partners. The founder of Civility Partners is named Catherine Matisse, and I'll speak more about her work as well. But this quote came out of that report. So over the course of the last year, there has been a lot of talking about what happened in IT, what happened to me and 4 other women. I have posed the questions as part of this talk. Has the credibility of the leadership improved? And are women safer now in IT at UC Berkeley than they were previously? Just so that we have some of the background, I initiated an investigation with an office on campus at Berkeley called the Office for the Prevention of Harassment and Discrimination. I also, in total, there were 14 instances that I documented. This is my documentation file that I provided to OPHD. 2 of the instances out of the 14 were sent to whistleblower. So I had concurrent whistleblower investigations in play and an OPHD investigation in play. I learned that my investigation was the largest investigation that had ever been conducted at Berkeley. I provided hundreds of pages of supporting documentation, 10 witnesses, and substantial descriptive timelines to support what had happened. The single finding was of hostile work environment. And you noticed on the prior slide that that's illegal. That is actually a finding that breaks the law. I will say that my credibility and professionalism and integrity were wholesale attacked. These were never things that were in question when I worked on the team that I was being harassed on for 2 years, but the investigator and the respondent. So in this case, I'm considered a complainant, and the individuals who I made the complaints against are considered respondents. They're called respondents. So I also want to mention that the investigator buried retaliation chain of events that I outlined very clearly with dates in a timeline and with written explanations. That complete chain of information was excluded from the report and from all of the documentation that she provided back. I'll also mention that the investigator, her name is Wendy Lillydahl. She is now the head of investigations for UC Davis, for OPHD, head of investigations for OPHD. This is a quote from the Civility Partners report. So I additionally posed the questions, how have IT and the university responded to date, and are these responses meaningful? Is IT a more inclusive place for women? And how do we know that something like this won't happen again? So at UC Berkeley in IT, these folks are in power. They are still in power. They played an active part in what happened to me. They coordinated very, very tightly to try to ensure that I would disappear and have no voice. So let's talk about privilege for a minute here. Privilege is about unchecked power and a lack of accountability. Generally, because the parties are not going to be affected, neither their power or their status will be affected by the issue that's before them that they choose not to address. So the ugliest behavior that I experienced was the dogpiling of leadership in IT on me, attacking me and preventing me from being able to speak, from being able to continue to escalate my concerns. Because of that dogpiling, it's what triggered to me that there was more to this, that it was actually bigger and worse than I imagined. Their response told me that they had been doing this for a very long time and that they were very confident that they could continue to do it. So my experience with the CIO, throughout most of 2018, post articles published, so this is after late February 2018, he characterized my treatment in IT as, quote, one person's opinion, repeatedly in public and privately, one person's opinion. I was one woman in 5 who were forced out of the team, and there was a finding. It's kind of strange to keep characterizing it as an opinion, unless you're trying to continue to knock my credibility. Last November, I reached out to him via email. I said, at your convenience, I'd like to meet with you in person. I was bombarded with phone calls and email after the ISTL staff where you publicly described my substantiated and fact-based experiences in the department that you oversee as one person's opinion. I understand that you also went on to suggest that if you were able to share the confidential information associated with my experiences, significant doubt would be created around my credibility and the credibility of my experiences. Your public tactics are not factual or useful in building trust and compassion in your department. With that email, he decided to meet with me. Keep in mind that I'd reached out to him multiple times during the investigation and when it concluded, asking to meet with him, and he refused. When we did meet, he made sure to bring HR, and we sat in his office, the three of us, and he admitted to having Ann Walls, who was the HR representative in his department, for too long. He said she was here too long. But that's in contradiction to a conversation that I had with Jo Magnus, who's the head of HR on campus. And she indicated that they tried to extend Ann Walls repeatedly, and that she's the one who said she can't be extended anymore. So I'm not sure which person is really telling the truth, but these two truths don't coexist. Larry can acknowledge that she was here too long, but she was continuously renewed after she retired, and she was very active in my investigation and the coordination that happened. I also indicated to Larry that he continues to intimidate me and the witnesses who were in my investigation, who are protected in this completed and concluded investigation. We all have rights to be protected, and that is not happening. He adamantly clings to year-over-year budget cuts as the contextual justification for why my position was eliminated. His internal HR representative, the woman who I mentioned, Ann Walls, in my investigation, she indicated that the budget is used as a way to justify cutting staff who complain. This was a quote that Larry said in our meeting. So the chief of staff, this is Liz Marsh. So she is co-leading with Larry the Equity and Inclusion Initiative in IT, which, based on my experiences, isn't really going to produce much. That's not going to result in the kind of change that I'm working towards and why I present every year on this topic. She attended the investigation meetings with the respondents. That means the folks that I indicated had conducted wrongdoing, she sat with them when they met with the investigators. She issued me my notice of intent for layoff paperwork. In that meeting, she admitted to receiving and reading the report, but was not intended for her to read. And she acknowledged that the team that I was being eliminated from had 2 open positions. Neither of these were offered to me. She continued throughout her time working in IST with Ann Walls to protect Ann Walls. Ann Walls had a long history of abusing staff, and Liz was making sure that none of that would come forward and cause any damage to Ann or herself. I'm going to pivot now to a quick video, and what I'm going to ask you to pay attention to is, this is a colleague, Nathan Clark. This was at an IST all-staff meeting, and he asks a very thoughtful question of leadership. He asks something that was brave for him to stand up in front of an audience and ask. Pay attention, if you will, to how the question gets answered.
I think it may kind of indirectly eventually produce, the kind of culture we want. But in a situation where it's happening, and it feels to me like in the case that I read and heard the most about, people were just pushing people around because they could, because they got their jollies from it, and no one stopped them. And it still feels like, who stops them? Nobody actually lost their job. People left of their own accord under good, auspices. And, where's the hard power? Where does it stop?
Who said that? Oh, yes, thank you. I was going to see if anyone from the action team wanted to say something. And anyone else?
So that was Liz handing the microphone to someone on the action team, Lucy, to answer a question that Nathan proposed to leadership. The action team is not in a position to answer questions about how the leadership is going to handle incidents like these going forward. But they're very happy to have the action team represent all of these issues and talk about them, even though the action team has no authority to actually impose anything in IT. And Nathan is a colleague who I've worked with before. He's great, but he was really asking something that is an important question. This is a quote that came to me through a colleague in IT. So what is my experience with the CTO, the department director, Bill Allison? In the investigation, he denied outright a number of clear statements that I provided. He was significantly dishonest in the way he portrayed the events. Many of the events were worse than what was made public because he claimed they didn't happen. He approved the creation of the position that I was hired into. And then he claimed 16 months later that the position had to be eliminated after I had been escalating concerns for over a year. He promoted a white male project manager a month before eliminating me. He went to extraordinary measures to make sure that this gentleman who lives remotely and works 100% time in another state would be protected in his position as a technical PM4. And I was in the role of a technical PM4. And you probably know, as you see employees, that when you're looking at eliminating a position, you try to see if there's a position for that person. You see if there's another place that they could be in your department that they would fit, that you could avoid the layoff. Well, instead of having me work in that role, he went through, as I said, extraordinary measures to protect this gentleman, to keep him, and to make sure that he was given significant raises. He also ignores all Public Records Act requests. And I'll talk about this a little later, but I have initiated a number of Public Records Act requests, and many of them are sitting on Bill's desk, and he does not respond to them. So this is another comment from Larry. So in fact, culture is not amorphous. Culture is very specific. Culture is about the mission statement of the organization, about policy and trainings. Climate, on the other hand, is about what gets rewarded, what's condoned, and what are the unwritten rules of play. If we were going to really address something in IT, we'd be addressing climate. We wouldn't be talking about culture all the time. Civility Partners did a culture assessment and produced a 30-page detailed report. So thank you to Civility Partners. You'll notice that I reference it a lot in the presentation. So as you probably are surmising, sexual harassment is about power. And I considered whether or not to report. I knew that if I chose to not report what was happening, these folks would get away with it. And I knew that if I reported it, they may not get away with it, but I wasn't absolutely certain that things were going to play out in a fair legal way. So Civility Partners, they have been doing what is kind of charged as a culture assessment. IST contacted Civility Partners and is in this kind of 18-month engagement. In order to produce the report that I referenced, Civility Partners did interviews with a randomly selected pool of staff, all of leadership, and then they produced this 33-page report on culture. The owner, Catherine, is the go-between for this action team that I mentioned, which is a volunteer group of folks who are trying to make things better. And Catherine is the person who takes their information and translates it to leadership, and then leadership responds. And so she's very much disseminating and in a position of power and control around what actually is going to get conveyed to leadership with what importance and what actually will be considered a top priority. So she is the telephone. In conversation with Catherine, so there have been a number of kind of mandatory trainings that have been rolling out from IT. And I was invited to a training that I attended. And after the training, I walked up to Catherine, and as is per the case in my world now, HR generally shows up quite quickly. And HR stood as I talked to Catherine, and I said, one of my harassers was invited to this training, and it's mandatory. That's not comfortable or trauma-informed or even respectful of the experiences that I've had on this campus. And she was extremely dismissive. She didn't even express concern or care or regret. It was characterized by HR as an oversight. So this quote also came to me. I would characterize it as dismissive, impatient, and privileged. It doesn't matter what happened to me because I'm in the past, and the things that I want are never going to happen. Which there's a lot that I want that probably, it's just, I can't read this without having a reaction. So there's an ongoing, growing body of work in something called epistemic dumping. This is around performing labor as a survivor. There's a phrase, epistemic hygiene. This is when survivors have to repeatedly describe what happened to them, describe the impact, relive the trauma, dispel rumors, address things that people think happened and ways that people are treating you that are based on their perception of what they were told by someone else. So that's one body of work. Then there's the epistemic dumping, which is that universities rely on survivors to do this labor to keep the system functioning. It's inherent in their operational structures. And in addition to that, this is overlooked, generally uncompensated work, it's a form of exploitation. So for folks who are doing this work on your campuses, make sure you're recognized in your performance evaluations. Make sure that your hours and your time and your effort are driven by the goals that you're setting for yourself and your manager in your performance evaluations. Don't do this labor for free, and don't do it unrecognized, and make sure you have clear outcomes for the work you're doing. So I will confirm that we, myself and the witnesses, were and continue to be retaliated against. We are the folks that people don't know how to deal with. We are the ones who make everyone uncomfortable in the room. We are the ones who care and are here and continuing to be engaged in our work at the university. In some cases, we see our salaries plateau. We may have been told things that never materialize. It's ongoing, it's real. So this is an actual compensation comparison between Alex Walton, the gentleman I indicated who was a technical PM4, who Bill Allison went through extraordinary measures to retain. Of note here is that in 2016, that is when I was being actively retaliated. Alex Walton was given an extraordinary raise. he received close to $285,000 that year. So what does systemic discrimination look like? And I mentioned Public Records Act requests, California PRAs. So I noted that I have a number of requests outstanding. PRAs exist as a way for institutions to be held to a standard of high transparency and accountability in their activities. PRAs are protected under Freedom of Information Act requests, and they are a civil liberty. And the UC Berkeley office, which handles the initial intake for PRAs, is under the chancellor, and that office indicates that PRAs will be responded to within 8 weeks. My PRAs are 145 weeks old. The first one is around the elimination of the technical project manager position on the team EEI. That's the position I occupied. The PRA office said, yes, this is FOIA-able information. This is information that the university can provide because you're not asking the details of the individual. You're asking about the elimination of the position and all supporting documentation. If it existed, you think they would provide it. I also asked for the qualifications for the endpoint engineering manager, who was my supervisor, who was found to have created a hostile work environment. I also asked for the qualifications for the chief of staff, that would be Liz Marsh. And I asked for the qualifications for the director of HR, Ann Walls, who both were presumably moved into positions with non-competes. And I asked for the documentation around Alex Walton's employment. These are serious violations. If you know anything about PRAs, you know that this is like, it's pretty significant, that they are potentially destroying information, waiting to retire or leave before they respond. So the IT narrative. These are all of the things that I've heard or been asked or been told about what really happened and how do we move on? How do we get past this difficult, uncomfortable time? So if this was about year after year budget cuts, I wouldn't be able to provide that information that I showed you. I was on a budget that was over $3 million, and less than half of that was for staff, and the other half was for whatever my supervisor wanted to spend it on. Claiming that I had to be eliminated doesn't make sense. This is all one person's opinion. I think I addressed that piece of the conversation, but it's continuing to be an attack on my credibility, diminishing the experiences of myself and a number of other folks. This one comes up a lot. The bad players are gone. Can't we just move on? We're okay, right? The really bad guys are gone. No, they are not. It's all in the past. I guess I'm not really here. I guess me and the experiences and the folks who came forward bravely are all in the past. We don't actually exist in the present or the future. This is a sentiment that a lot of individuals who were shocked and then were chagrined that they had to do a bunch of training because IT is imposing a lot of training. Why does everyone have to suffer? Vanessa isn't in IT. Actually, I am. RTL has a dual reporting line to the Vice Chancellor of Undergraduate Education, VCUE, and IST. And there's more to the story than you know. If these folks could share the details of what really happened, of course you wouldn't believe her story. I wanted to bring this back again, the privilege description, because I think it really plays into understanding what I think is really operational core values in IT around the leadership. So with the help of EEO in Central HR, I was able to get this data. So Gender distribution has not changed in IT for the length of Larry's tenure. It's flatlined compared to all staff across the campus. And when you look at IT departmentally, it's fifth from the bottom in terms of gender parity. Silence protects the harassers. And since you know sexual harassment is about power, if you are being treated as if you don't matter, and then on top of it, the message is for you to be quiet and keep your head down, the only folks you're helping are the harassers. I'm going to pivot to another video. This is Colette Jackson. She's also a colleague.
So we all kind of want respect and we want safety. And we want to feel those things. And I'm saying that it's actually no longer okay, and I think everybody feels this way, it's no longer okay for some of us to come to work and feel respected, valued, empowered even, while others in our same organization, our same work family, are harassed, disrespected, or undervalued. Here's the thing. Once we know someone has been harassed in our organization, or if we witness bullying or disrespect, suddenly we no longer feel comfortable inside. That sense of safety that we had just a minute ago, it's disrupted. So if you are affected, I am affected. Now that's the feedback we also got. There were a lot of people that said, I was shocked to hear that these things were happening to others. and it's got to change. It's got to stop. And that's what people said because of this feeling. And that is what lets me know that no matter who we are in our organization, I don't care if we're engineers, technological wizards, manager experts, whether we can wield a cable tester or spin the web of customer satisfaction like a saint, whether we're foundational workers or we are leadership. We all want this thing. We want to make this change. If we are strong and comfortable and happy in our places, then we will learn to be allies. If we are weaker, we feel disrespected right now, then we will get the tools to be stronger. And we will turn around, and one of those allies will be at our back and supporting and stepping in. And that's what we want. That's what we want to happen here. And I know we want it.
So Colette very succinctly articulated what we would like to see, what we would hope the institution would believe is important and respond to. Okay, so how could UC Berkeley get it right? I have some recommendations. They're not far off from what I talked about last year. They are still deeply, deeply important in my opinion. So zero tolerance. Enforce zero tolerance for behavior that intimidates, marginalizes, or sabotages anyone. Be clear that this is the policy in the department. You will not tolerate any kind of bullying or harassment, period. Put some skin in the game. Enforce zero tolerance for policy violations, PPSM, SVSH, state, federal employment. If you're a leader, be aware of these policies and these rules and these laws and adhere to them. Is that too much to ask for? In March 2018, Janet Napolitano stated, "We must and we will do a better job of investigating all claims of sexual harassment or sexual violence thoroughly and fairly. Napolitano wrote in the open letter, and when claims are substantiated, we must hold people accountable and impose sanctions that appropriately reflect the seriousness of these cases. So maybe I should have initiated my investigation after March 2018 and not with the head of investigations at UC Davis. Eliminate symbolic compliance. Let's move beyond rote legal compliance. Let's train people in how to be civil to colleagues if they don't already know how to do it, and how to speak up as a bystander, which I know is some of the work that the action team is doing. Tie compliance with performance evaluations, and build trust and protect women and minorities in the workplace. This sounds counterintuitive. Let's create safe spaces where all participants can speak and be heard. And remember that the vast majority of employees do not report sexual harassment. It doesn't mean it's not happening. It means they don't report it. Less than 5% report it. Train and authorize employees throughout the organization to do complaint intake. Reward managers if harassment complaints increase, at least initially, because it means employees have faith in the system. And advocate for alternative reporting options to identify hotspots in the department. Departments with leadership that have proven to be complicit or in full denial absolutely need oversight, and not within the institution itself. True oversight means that adherence to policy is enforced. True oversight means that there are consequences for not taking demonstrable action. And inherent in this oversight is data collection on staff diversity, retention, annual benchmarking, and multi-year comparisons. I hope someone's next door asking the CIOs for that data. These are my references. This is my bibliography. So now what do I focus on? I speak up and ask uncomfortable questions, always. I speak with writers and journalists and activists. I am frequently invited to present at academic conferences, and I will continue to do that across the country to create awareness and also to create pressure on Berkeley. I network with higher ed faculty and administration. I make myself available to women who are being harassed. And to follow my ongoing work, you can visit uctimesup.com. These 3 PRAs that I just mentioned will be posted there shortly. I want to thank you for your time. If you would like to contact me privately, please feel very welcome to do so. Let's open it up for discussion and questions. Katie.
Vanessa, given that there are salary ranges associated with titles such as technical project manager 4, how do they justify the extreme difference in your salary versus Alex's salary? Was his salary outside range for that?
So he was on contract, and he was considered a consultant. So he came in as a consultant to be a technical PM4, which is how they could get outside of the classification bounds. It's why I asked for the information. I'd like to see it. Yes?
Hi. PPSM are the rules governing employees. And I found through my work that PPSM has no timelines, and there's no requirement for them to respond to any PPSM grievances at any time. Everybody needs to be aware that for union represented employees, there are 30-day timelines on grievances that are made, and it's required. So one thing that we need to do is we need to improve PPSM. We need to give timelines, that requirements for UC to respond to PPSM Article 70 complaints, which is, you had a sexual harassment thing, but for other complaints, it's PPSM Article 70, and which would be for a variety of other people. And PPSM is a document of rules for UC employees. They can change it, but they can't change it in your individual circumstance. So it's a set of rules that are there, and so for lower grade things, not as severe as this, lower grade workplace complaints, you have the PPSM 70 complaint process, and we've had some success with it. We don't always, but they can, if it's an uncomfortable situation, or if they're just wrong, they can just not respond.
So no statute, just can go on and on. Thanks for that. Other folks?
So there's mandatory reporting, and is that actually an impediment to getting the facts? Because as a victim, we might feel that, well, I'm going to put all this burden on these people, and there are other institutions that are implementing alternate methods other than direct Title I.
Mm-hmm.
Has the UC system investigated that at all?
So like Callisto or bringing in an external product that would help for...
There's a University of Oregon, a friend of mine is Jennifer Fry. And so, and the University of Oregon has brought in sort of this anonymous reporting of harassment incidents.
Mm-hmm.
And it just provides a report, it's there, there's no action is taken from it. But if there's a certain number of reports with the same people, in the same organization, then there's more action taken.
So it is a big deal to report. And when I talk to individuals who are trying to decide on next steps, I really ask, what outcome do you want? What are you hoping to see happen? And understand that these are the things that are in play that could prevent that. It's a huge ask to tell people, keep reporting. I'm fully on board with some type of tool to start to track events and to see where there are hot spots. If there's a particular manager who is getting a lot of, who's getting kind of frequent reports of misbehavior. I know that when I brought in a third party that does that kind of anonymous reporting, it was pretty controversial. There were concerns about how to handle the data. Once who owns the data? How does it get addressed? If it does cross into sexual violence. So there are a lot of, but I'm happy to talk to Oregon if you would be willing. Yeah.
I could send you to Jennifer's.
I'd love to know more. So yeah, but it's a very difficult area to navigate, and the institutions do nothing to help with that navigation.
Advocate for institutional courage, and that's what it takes to make it right, is for the institutions to say, this is the way we are, and we don't tolerate it.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Other questions? Oh, sorry. Yeah, hi, Anne.
I just want to make a quick point and then have a question. I also am at UC Berkeley working under IST, and Vanessa mentioned the Civility Partners survey where they interviewed 30% of staff and all of leadership. And if our IT staff is mostly white and male and leadership is almost entirely white and male, that means survivors of harassment are terribly underrepresented in that survey. But even so, we still had a lot of evidence of harassment.
Right. Yeah, thanks. Anne.
But my question is, do you have more information about the action team, like how they were formed and what they've been up to?
So I don't want to speak for them. My understanding is that there was a call for volunteers to participate in this new body called the Action Team, and to work closely with civility partners. I believe they have a cadence for their meetings, potentially something like an hour every 2 weeks. I think there were about 12 folks from IST who participated in it, and I don't want to speak for the team, but that's kind of my understanding of the tactical. And I've had individuals have approached me privately to share what they are, how the sessions are going and how the conversations are going, and it's a lot of work. It's a huge lift on the folks who are volunteers, and I think it's safe to say a number of them are survivors, so they are now doing that epistemic work is now part of their ongoing volunteerism. through civility partners that then, kind of gets capped because Catherine is the primary working with the leadership. I think folks in the action team talk with Larry, or maybe will talk with Larry, but again, if we don't have the accountability, if we don't have leadership saying we will not tolerate this, then the work of the action team is all in the spirit, but it's not going to make lasting change, right? Not much will change, unfortunately, in my opinion. Yeah, Katie.
How was Civility Partners chosen?
My understanding is that it was between Mark Fisher, who is Larry Conrad's supervisor, and Larry. So it was someone who I think Mark knew. So he's a vice chancellor. He's came from Santa Barbara. I did sit down with him last year, and one of the first things he said is, "I wasn't here when this happened to you. This wasn't, this wasn't on my watch." And I said, "Well, Civility Partners is on your watch. Why is that? Why is she reporting to Larry for that work?" She lives in. Just watch yourself when you walk out of here. I don't want anyone slipping. I think there are marbles on the loose. So Catherine lives in San Diego, so she's not even local to Berkeley. And one of the things that I was sort of struck by is I know probably a dozen folks who run companies and do this exact kind of work in Berkeley and San Francisco. And why wouldn't we have sourced someone local who could actually be on site for meetings and participate in a way, in person, right? Instead of like having someone that we fly in who can't be here all the time, does a lot of remote sessions. It doesn't really make sense unless they knew her well and wanted her approved of her work, right? So it's a little. I don't even know if it was competed. Other stuff. Yeah, Allison.
There's a number of us who are on the action team who are in the room right now, so I'm happy to, if you have questions about the action team, I can't speak for the rest of you, but if you want to ask us about it, I will definitely echo what Vanessa was saying, that it's hard work. It takes a lot of time, and it's emotionally very draining, especially for people who've been there. I'll also comment that of the 12 people, 10 of them are female. And this was based on people volunteering to join. So that's like
number. I would go with Allison also, if you guys want any answers or
Are you getting, is your time being recognized? As part of your job?
Is your time being recognized?
It's not part of our performance evaluation or our work responsibilities. We did get, there's an incentive program, we get a special bonus for extra work.
Oh, really? We do it because we can.
And so I want to take a moment to recognize that there are folks in the room who are part of the investigation. They have been very, very brave. They partnered with me throughout the process. They are in this room. They are people that I admire, respect, and have great. I could not have done this without their participation, and they risked a lot and continue to risk a lot to have done this work. So thank you, the folks who are in the room who were part of who you know who you are. So, yeah. Rachel?
So clearly there's a lot to be desired in this whole program, but I see some pieces that kind of make sense to me. Hopefully the action team is being recognized for their work, and if they have to take a day or something to do that work, it's not something they should make up, for example, I hope. The fact that it's almost entirely women kind of addresses Anne's point about the survey not fully addressing more marginalized members of the community, so there's some kind of balance there. I just wonder, so if they're being recognized for their time, if they come up with, let's say, recommendations for climate, that seems to be a good first step. And the second step is, of course, for leadership to act on that, to take the zero tolerance. So that's the part that's really distinct, just not happening. Is that right?
I think that's a very fair characterization, Rachel. There's a lot of effort being expended by the folks who really want to see the change, but not a lot of commitment from the leadership to be accountable and make sure this doesn't happen again. And if it does happen again the way Nathan asked, what would happen? How would it be addressed?
Being adjacent to Silicon Valley, this is not new territory. This is rampant in IT, and ISD is vulnerable to people escaping off to tech jobs. Leadership at Berkeley could be consulting with them. Not that they have to track records, but it's not in isolation.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a number of nonprofits. KPOR does a lot of work around this in Oakland, so that the body of work is out there, and there are a number of ways to address this and to invest in resources to really improve the climate and make this a place where everyone can thrive, the way Colette described, right? We all want to thrive. We all want to do good work. So, yeah.
Is process materially different for represented staff? If you're represented staff, I just don't know if that would be helpful.
Which process?
The whole harassment process. Do you think the outcome would be different if you're represented?
I think OPHD has a very well-oiled machine for the way they operate. So I think that's a whole nother presentation about OPHD and how they operate, how they are not observing Title IX, but they've never been dinged for that, so they don't lose Title IX funding. So I'm not sure. Oh, okay, so this gentleman, do we?
Represented staff are governed by a contract between their union and UC. There is a third party, independent third party, the Public Employee Relations Board, which arbitrates those disputes. So with represented staff, and I've represented, I'm a steward for UPI, full disclosure, sorry. As a steward for UPI, I've represented both unrepresented staff members and represented. I have far fewer problems with UC following through with the represented staff than I do the unrepresented. The unrepresented are governed by PPSM. PPSM has no timelines, no independent third party. The union contracts have the independent third party of the Public Employee Relations Board that UC has to be held accountable to. So there is a difference. With the sideline, I don't.
So we're over. I know that you're about to have us stop. If you guys want to pick up, I appreciate the conversation. Are there any other questions that? Okay, Marlita, and let me start to break down this. But go ahead, Marlita.
I want to start by thanking you. Such hard work. I appreciate that. And I'm wondering if at this phase of this long set of work that you're still undertaking, that we're all undertaking, you have anything that you feel like, here's a point of light, here's a achievement, here's a mode of positivity that you could share, that you can build on.
So I'm still at Berkeley because I love the work I do. And I will continue to be at Berkeley doing this work and the actual work that I do that I'm recognized for in my position. I love Berkeley. So there's a lot of light. But in terms of, what I'm presenting here, I wish that I had a rosier picture. I wish that I could tell you that a lot of good has happened in the last year. But that's simply not the case in my perspective. So, yeah. And I'll maybe we'll take you offline. So, yeah, but you want to?
The question is, has the action team actually